Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on All India Radio. This is R.S. Raghu, and with me is Manoj Singh Rana, bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment, and more. The headlines. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi reviews situation in Ukraine. Nearly 10,800 stranded Indians brought back by special flights so far under Operation Ganga from Ukraine's neighboring countries. 16 flights scheduled for next 24 hours, including 4 C-17 aircrafts of Indian Air Force. UNHRC votes for formation of Commission of Inquiry to monitor alleged human rights violations by Russian army in Ukraine. At least 56 people killed in bomb blast at a Shiite mosque of Peshawar city in Pakistan. Legendary Australian cricketers Shane Warne and Rod Marsh pass away. And India were 357 for 6 in their first innings against Sri Lanka at stumps on day 1 of first cricket test at Mohali. As we start the bulletin, we appeal to our listeners to stay safe from COVID-19 by following these 4 simple steps. Get fully vaccinated, wear a face mask, maintain 2 gaz ki duri for social distancing, and focus on hand and face hygiene. And now the news in detail. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi chaired a meeting to review the situation in Ukraine on Friday. The meeting was attended by Union Ministers Dr. S. Jaishankar and Piyush Goyal along with National Security Advisor Ajit Doval, Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla and other senior officials. 2 days back, the Prime Minister had held a similar meeting on the Ukraine crisis. He has been continuously holding high-level meetings on the Ukraine crisis since the beginning of the conflict.
Nearly 10,800 Indians have been brought back by special flights from Ukraine's neighbouring countries under Operation Ganga so far. The Civil Aviation Ministry in a statement on Friday said over 9,364 Indians have been evacuated by 43 special civilian flights, while 7 flights of C-17 have evacuated 1,428 passengers so far. C-17 also carried 9.7 tons of relief material. The External Affairs Ministry has said over 20,000 Indians have left the Ukraine's borders so far. Briefing the media, External Affairs Ministry spokesperson Arindam Bagchi said 18 flights have landed in India in the last 24 hours, carrying around 4,000 Indians on board. He added that a total of 48 flights have landed so far from Ukraine's neighbouring countries. He said 16 flights scheduled for the next 24 hours, including 4 Indian Air Force's C-17 aircraft. Giving assurance that flights will continue to operate till the evacuation of every Indian from Ukraine. He said with the operation of special flights, a vast majority of Indians who have crossed over Ukraine's borders would have returned to India.
There will be some more left. We will continue to schedule flights, not only to bring those people back who have already crossed over, but also those who will or who are yet to cross over from Ukraine itself right now. So I just wanted to assure people who think the flights are ending, no, flights will continue till we manage to get everybody out who can leave Ukraine.
Talking about the evacuation drive, Mr. Bagchi said the highest attention is on the eastern side of Ukraine, particularly Kharkiv and Pisyuchin. He said the Indian mission in Ukraine has managed to get some buses there. He said around 300 Indians are stranded in Kharkiv, 900 in Pisyuchin, and more than 700 in Sumy.
I'm happy to share that we have managed to get some buses there because this is a place, a small village there. I think we managed to get 5 buses already. Yesterday, I think 2 buses left, taking them to Lviv. Today, 3 buses have left. I think they're trying to reach the Moldovan border. We're looking at whatever ways to get them out into a safe zone. We're looking at more buses as we can. I think a couple of more buses should happen later in the evening, tomorrow. So that process has begun. I have seen messages from many people who are stuck there saying, look, I wanted to assure them that we are aware that they are there. We are monitoring the situation and we are trying our best. See how fast you can get you away safely in an organized manner. I know they have Kharkiv. They're in a safe zone, but we now need to bring them back.
In today's Hotspot section, we bring you a discussion on war zone safety protocols and their importance. We are joined by Lieutenant General S.A. Hasnain, former GOC, 15 Army Corps.
Joining us today on perspective on what to do in conflict zone or war zones and how to protect themselves, we are joined by Lieutenant General S.A. Hasnain of the former GOC, 15 Army Corps. Sir, what would you suggest civilians do if they are caught in a conflict zone?
Thank you for having me on your show. That's a very important question with the kind of activities which are going on in Kharkiv now. We are told that Kiev is evacuated completely as far as Indian students are concerned, but Kharkiv, there may be other centers which are potentially still under threat. Now, one of the first things that a student in a war zone or any civilian in a war zone should do is to use a common sense approach. And a common sense approach primarily alludes to the fact that don't be alone, be in groups. Soldiers always operate in groups, get strengthened from groups. If you don't have big groups, at least a buddy pair, 2 people together. And make sure that any activity that you do, your buddy also accompanies you. 2 people must go everywhere together so that no one is isolated and no one is lost. Avoid going anywhere near government buildings, military buildings or institutions of the military, because these are prime targets of the adversaries always, of the people who are fighting on the ground. Missile attacks, air attack, rocket attacks will all take place primarily on these buildings. The next point which you must do is to conserve your logistics. Now, it's not a normal situation, so don't start having your meals as if you are having them on an everyday basis. That is absolutely necessary to make sure that you conserve your food. There will be a shortage of food. There will be a shortage of bottled water. Wherever you can keep your bottle, so you keep it. If you've got empty bottles, fill them up with whatever drinkable water you get. Because there may be times when 48 hours you may not be able to step out to even get a mouthful of water. This is a very important aspect as far as logistics is concerned. Keep a knapsack. I'm sure all of them have got their rucksacks with them. Even now, if there are some stores potentially, possibly open here and there, try and make sure you get batteries, get your basic toiletries, get a torch, get a small knife, a spoon, a steel bowl, or something which will help you to get food from anywhere else, conserve a little amount of food with you. This is again very, very important. And one very, very important aspect, keep your mobile charged. If there is power there will be a power source somewhere or the other. I can see that so far power has not come down completely. Please, at the first instance, make sure you charge your mobile and keep a spare battery. If you've got a spare battery, ensure that also remains charged. So this is your outlet to the world. At the end of the day, you have to inform people where you are. And this is the way to remain in connectivity. Keep your social media contact all the time apprised of where you are, under what conditions you are. I know that the Indian Embassy from Kiev has moved to westward, but wherever they are, if you can be in touch with the Indian Embassy and reveal them your location, it will always be a good thing to coordinate subsequent missions which may take place even as the war is continuing to be fought. So these are some of the issues. I would also strongly advocate that if you're staying in the group, make a small placard saying India. India is one of the respected nations in this whole unfortunate set of circumstances. We are neutral. Both sides respect our neutrality, and therefore, if once you can display and prove that you are from India, you will be helped by whichever side is sitting anywhere in the area around. And the last and most important thing for me, doctors, many of you are from medical colleges, many of you are senior students. So therefore, the senior people among you who have almost become doctors themselves, identify them. Keep them with you, because a medical assistance may be required at any particular time. Over an elongated period of time, absence of water, absence of sufficient food, etc. will lead to a certain deterioration in your health. And it's important to pool in whatever resources you've got, whatever form of medicines you've got, pool them all in together and keep them under surveillance, keep them under the control of a potential doctor or a doctor who's about to become a guide.
Right, sir, some very crucial suggestions made by you, General Hasnain. One of them is to conserve food and water and keep some generic medicine and keep in touch with medical community, especially the Indian medical community, as much as you can. What kind of food one can stock up on, and should it be high-calorie food? Should one rely on dry food, which can last longer?
Mostly it should be dry food, something which can be, you don't need to cook at all. It should be instant, ready to eat. The minute, remember, on emergency rations, so the Indian emergency rations always involves shakkar paras, but obviously you don't expect shakkar paras there. So chocolates are high energy. You will get protein bars, energy bars, the other kind of things. Even one energy bar is good enough to make you last for about 10 to 12 hours. You don't need anything more as a filler. That water is the critical, because there's a tendency to get thirsty. When you're not eating, you're going to get thirsty, and you will tend to consume more than the required water. Don't be tempted by that. Don't use water for ablutions. Whatever dry methods are there, but keep your water intact for drinking subsequently.
Yes, and very often we look at Twitter feed wherein we note that authorities are asking civilians to go to shelters after an air raid siren has been sounded. What is an air raid siren? When is it sounded? And what should civilians do when it is sounded?
There are 2-3 things as far as air raids and shelling is concerned. Usually there is a pattern to shelling. You will find that after having spent 24 hours underground somewhere and you heard the sounds, you can generally make out, okay, now this is the time at which shelling normally takes place. And sure, 2 hours around that period, you don't step out of your shelters. This is exactly probably what happened to a very, very unfortunate incident which happened with one of our young friends, which happened in Kharkiv. So, stepping out like this without warning, if you have established a pattern, please follow that pattern. The second thing is that there will be no warnings. The air raid sirens will go based upon the surveillance which is going on by the military. You will hear these sirens. The moment sirens go off, you know that in 10 minutes' time, approximately usually about 10 minutes' time, some kind of an air attack is going to appear over the area in which you are holed up, wherever you are hiding at that time. Need to go make sure that you go underground. If you are overground somewhere hiding for that moment, go underground. I fully agree you can't remain underground all the time, so it's important to study the pattern. How often do the air raids take place, and what frequency are they? It is after 6 hours, after 8 hours. From this pattern, you will be able to establish for yourself and be able to make use of the interval.
And sir, what sort of coordination is a civilian in a conflicted zone is expected to do? Is the civilian expected to constantly monitor various updates being sent out by the Government of India, the Ministry of External Affairs, or by the Indian Embassy? Should they at the earliest get in touch with the embassy staff that has been deputed? Their numbers are also out in public domain. There is an @Operation Ganga Twitter handle for the evacuation process. Is it important to stay updated about the recent developments as far as evacuation is concerned?
That is absolutely mandatory. And one of the methods of doing it also to conserve battery power, to conserve your mobile power, you should nominate people who will be responsible for these messaging, monitoring, receiving messages, sending messages, etc. for a period of time. Otherwise, you will find in a group of 15 people, all 15 people are involved in trying to, to access here and there, and you're all going to run out of battery. So it's best to conserve your battery power. Let one or two make this access. Always remain in touch. Perhaps you can open a WhatsApp group immediately, and the person you contact with them, you can open a WhatsApp group, have some kind of a methodology, have a frequency of contacting each other. I foresee that as time goes along and there is a greater amount of attrition on these cities, this communication may not last. Because after all, everything depends on towers, where towers are. It also depends on internet, underground internet, overground internet. These are the kind of facilities and infrastructure which will start dying out soon. So it's important that right at the beginning you make the contacts now. And subsequently, if you have to move and get to some other city, or you're taken to some other city, at least try and make access there immediately to the infrastructure.
And for instance, if there's a group of students that is looking at an evacuation, does it help to have one coordinator in that group to coordinate with various authorities and communicating with the rest of them, as opposed to each person trying to coordinate with the authorities?
That's exactly what I was meaning when I gave out my earlier advice. Leadership in a combat zone of this nature is very important. One among 15, 20, 30 people invariably emerges as a leader. That's a natural situation with all humans. When the moment you have 25, 30 human beings, one or two will emerge as leaders. Let them emerge as leaders. Give them the official kind of charge to be leaders. Because 25, 30 people trying to do everything themselves is the worst kind of way of management. So leader is important, 1 to 2 people, and probably a number 2, deputy, also appointed simultaneously. It's also important to maintain a small little structure of the leadership. You can have someone looking after all aspects of communication, someone looking after all aspects of logistics, someone looking at all aspects of surveillance, which means essentially going around and checking and making sure that everyone is safe and that there are no threats which are emerging.
And sir, in a situation that a civilian discovers that he or she is running out of batteries or groceries, does not have the dry ration, when should they venture out of the homes or the shelters or bunkers? And what is the right time in those 24 hours?
Before anything else, let me advise, once again remind, that this is a war zone. It's also called a combat zone. A combat zone is not an ordinary kind of an environment. It's an extra special environment in which there are live threats which are there all the time. So don't expect that you're going to get replacements here. Don't expect that if your batteries run out, you're going to get replacements for your batteries and you can step out to that. That's the reason why I'm advising you to maintain your, whatever resources you have to take last out over a period of the next 15 days, 20 days, a month, however long this terrible war lasts. That is the manner in which you need to approach your survivability in this environment. It's all a question of survival. There is no luxury here. You cannot have the luxury of surplus here. Everything is deficient. Just remember that.
Thank you, General Hasnain. Very important points made by you on what civilians should do in combat zones or war zones. Thank you very much.
Russia has taken control of a nuclear power station in Ukraine. A fire broke out at Zaporizhia nuclear plant, the largest in Europe, and Ukraine said it was shelled by Russian troops. Authorities say the facility is now safe and radiation levels are normal. A report.
World leaders have accused Russia of endangering the safety of an entire continent, and Ukraine's president accused Russia of nuclear terror. US President Joe Biden urged Moscow to stop its military activities around the site, while Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said the horrific attacks from Russia must cease immediately. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson said the reckless attack could directly threaten the safety of all of Europe. All three leaders spoke to Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky on phone. President Zelensky meanwhile said Russia wanted a repeat of Chernobyl, the site of the world's worst nuclear disaster in 1986. Russia's defense ministry blamed the attack on Ukrainian saboteurs, calling it a monstrous provocation without providing evidence. A video feed from the nuclear plant showed blast lighting up the night sky and sending up plumes of smoke. According to Ukraine's nuclear inspectorate, buildings around one of the plant's 6 power units have been damaged without affecting its safety. The United Nations top human rights body has voted overwhelmingly to appoint a 3-person panel of experts to monitor alleged human rights violations by Russian army in Ukraine. The Human Rights Council voted 30-2 with 13 abstentions to pass a resolution that was presented by many Western countries and others who have spoken out against Moscow's operation. Only Russia and Eritrea opposed the resolution, with China abstaining. The voting on Friday was the culmination of an urgent debate called by Ukraine, during which most council members criticized Russia. Abhishek Mukhopadhyay for World News, AIR.
This is All India Radio giving you the news. For quick news updates round the clock, follow us on Twitter at AIR News Alerts.
Global stocks on Friday fell while safe haven investments like gold and US dollar hit multi-year high amid continuation of Russian military operation in Ukraine on the 9th day. After reports that Russian forces seized Europe's biggest nuclear power plant in Ukraine, the currencies of many developing countries depreciated amid a higher demand of the US dollar. Experts said that cutting off many Russian banks from interbank payment system SWIFT can hit the industries which depend on supply of industrial commodities. The News Services Division of All India Radio talked to senior financial expert Puneet Jain over the impact of the Russia-Ukraine conflict on global economy as well as on India.
The world economy is in a state of crisis right now because we are barely recovering from pandemic when this geopolitical situation in Russia and Ukraine has increased the stakes on the global economy. The biggest problem that the global economy is facing is crude oil. Prices have gone up, which will feed into inflation. So inflation has become very high. And this is a problem for India also because India's economic growth gets affected because we have to raise interest rates and we have to bring down prices. The good news about India is that we have very strong fundamentals. We have a good position as far as foreign exchange reserves are concerned, which are at record high of $650 billion. So we should be able to face this imported inflation to some extent. But even then, I think Indian economy's growth may be below what we were expecting earlier. We were expecting 10% growth next year, but I think now that growth may be affected to some extent to about 8% growth. So while the global economy is hurting India through high inflation, I think India's strong fundamentals will help us to face this situation in the short term.
Now let's take a look at the news from the business world.
Sensex lost 769 points, 1.4%, to finish at 54,334. Nifty also tumbled by 252 points, 1.53%, to settle at 16,245. Among global markets, Asian equities fell after news of a fire near a Ukraine nuclear facility following the fighting with Russian forces heightened investor fears about the escalating conflict and sent oil prices higher. Hong Kong's Hang Seng slipped 2.5%. Japan's Nikkei 225 lost 2.2% and South Korea's Kospi fell 1.2%. Singapore's Straits Times ended 0.8% down and China's Shanghai Composite Index declined 1%. European share markets were also down in intraday trade. Oil rose around 2% to trade above $112 per barrel. In a volatile session, crude prices climbed as fears over disruption to Russian oil exports in the face of Western sanctions offset the prospect of more Iranian supplies in the event of a nuclear deal with Tehran. In intraday trade, Brent crude was trading around $112.60 per barrel. Arjun Chaudhary for World News, All India Radio.
In Pakistan, at least 56 people were killed and 194 others were wounded following a massive bomb blast inside a Shiite Muslim mosque in its northern city of Peshawar. Local police official Wahid Khan said the explosion occurred when worshippers had gathered in the Kucha Risaldar Mosque in Peshawar's old city for Friday prayers. Peshawar Police Chief Muhammad Ijaz Khan said the violence started when two armed attackers opened fire on police outside the mosque. One attacker and one policeman were killed in the gunfight, and another police official was wounded. The second attacker then ran inside the mosque and detonated a bomb. No one immediately claimed responsibility for the blast. Two legendary cricketers of Australia, Shane Warne and Rod Marsh, passed away on Friday. Shane Warne died at the age of 52 after a suspected heart attack at Koh Samui in Thailand. He is widely considered one of the best players in history, having taken 708 wickets in 145 test matches. He was a key member in one of the greatest teams in history, with Australia dominating the sport for much of his 15-year international career. A statement from Warne's management said Shane was found unresponsive in his villa and despite the best efforts of medical staff, he could not be revived. India's Information and Broadcasting Minister Anurag Thakur has expressed grief over the passing away of the king of spin, Shane Warne. In a tweet, Mr. Thakur said that Shane Warne, a legend who spun magic on the field and won admirers in the world of cricket. Legendary Australia wicketkeeper Rod Marsh also died on Friday after suffering a heart attack. He was 74.
In cricket, India were 357 for 6 in their first innings against Sri Lanka at Stumps on the opening day of the first test match in Mohali. Earlier, the hosts won the toss and elected to bat first. Ravindra Jadeja on 45 runs and Ravichandran Ashwin on 10 runs were at the crease at the end of the day's play. Rishabh Pant was the top scorer for the day with 96 runs, followed by Hanuma Vihari 58 and Virat Kohli 45 runs. Earlier, the hosts won the toss and elected to bat first. The two-match series between India and Sri Lanka marks the beginning of Rohit Sharma's journey as the skipper of the test side. And incidentally, this is the 100th test of star cricketer Virat Kohli. Sri Lanka are yet to defeat India in tests in India, a run which Rohit will continue in the upcoming series. India have played against Sri Lanka 20 times at home, with the men in blue emerging victorious on 11 occasions, while the remaining 9 ended in draw. In the first match of ICC Women's Cricket World Cup, West Indies defeated New Zealand by 3 runs at the Bay Oval, Mount Maunganui on Friday. Chasing a victory target of 260 runs, New Zealand were all out for 256 in 49.5 overs. Earlier, New Zealand won the toss and asked the West Indies to bat first. South Africa will take on Bangladesh at the University Oval, Dunedin on Saturday. The match is scheduled to begin at 3:30 a.m. IST. India will begin their journey in the tournament on Sunday when they take on arch rivals Pakistan. England is the defending champion of the tournament. This tournament is being played in a round-robin format where a total of 8 teams are taking part. The 8 teams include India, Pakistan, Australia, Bangladesh, New Zealand, South Africa, England and the West Indies. The top 4 teams in the points table after the league stage will lock horns in the semi-final.
Now let us take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. Let us take a look at the press reports on China. News of the annual meetings of the 2 of China's top political bodies commencing in Beijing dominated headlines. Xinhua reported the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference CPPCC will convene on 4th of March and the National People's Congress NPC will convene on 5th of March. They are expected to continue until March 10 and 11th. Mail Online reports that tensions in the athlete villages, threats of competition boycotts and 11th hour reversal to ban Russian athletes have marred the lead-up to Friday's opening of the Beijing Winter Paralympics. Prasar Bharati Beijing reports that the International Paralympic Committee IPC on Thursday banned athletes from Russia and Belarus from competing in the 2022 Beijing Winter Paralympics, which opened on 4th of March 2022 following an international backlash against its earlier decision to let them compete under neutral affiliations. Prasar Bharati Beijing reports that Beijing-based Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank AIIB has announced that all activities relating to Russia and Belarus are on hold and under review due to the ongoing war in Ukraine. Russia is a founding member of AIIB. Neither Ukraine nor Belarus are members. Reuters reported an Indian tax investigation into China's Huawei Technologies has found the telecoms equipment maker manipulated account books to reduce its taxable income in the country, quoting an Indian government source. PTI reported China is provoking India at every turn, just as it is doing with the United States, and Washington is committed to accelerating progress in strengthening India's defense capacity to deter Chinese provocations, a senior Biden administration official has told lawmakers. SCMP writes, in fast-changing Europe, rage against Russia fuels suspicion of China. Europeans have been galvanized by the Ukraine crisis, and China is not immune from the consequences, even as frustration mounts over China's rhetorical backing for Russia. EU asked for Beijing to help negotiate a ceasefire. Kai-Shin writes in an analysis that China's CIPS cannot rescue Russian banks from SWIFT ban. It says alternative banking transaction settlement system lacks scope of Western counterpart. Reuters reported Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen bestowed a presidential honor on former U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo on Thursday for his contribution to boosting relations with the island, as China's government lambasted his record as despicable. A quick look at the headlines once again. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi reviews the situation in Ukraine. Nearly 10,800 stranded Indians brought back by special flights so far under Operation Ganga from Ukraine's neighboring countries. 16 flights scheduled for next 24 hours, including 4 C-17 aircraft of Indian Air Force. UNHRC votes for formation of Commission of Inquiry to monitor alleged human rights violations by Russian army in Ukraine. At least 56 people killed in bomb blast at Shiite mosque of Peshawar city in Pakistan. Legendary Australian cricketers Shane Warne and Rod Marsh pass away, and India were 357 for 6 in their first innings against Sri Lanka at Stumps on day 1 of first cricket test at Mohali. And now, before we end, let us listen to Mahatma Gandhi's favourite Bhajan Vaishnav Janaba artists from Bulgaria on their Independence Day. And with that, we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.